Avatar: The Last Airbender in live action. Is it as bad of an idea as people think? So, unlike the first attempt to bring Avatar into the real world, Netflix actually got to adapt Book 2 of the original series. Let's see what went wrong. Chapter 1. A pale imitation. So quick thing, I've actually only watched the very first episode of season 1 and the first episode of season 2 of this live action show. I watched the very first episode back when it came out 2 years ago and just couldn't bring myself to continue with it. And I watched the first episode of season 2 because, well, I guess this is like my job now, to watch stuff like this and critique it. Anyway, I want to make it clear that I haven't seen everything this show has to offer. So if there are things that you think I'm being unfair about with that in mind, please let me know and I will take it into consideration. And if this video does really well, then when the final season drops, I'll torture myself and cover the entire series. So, share this video with your friends if you want to see that. But even just in looking at episode 1 of the live action second season, we can get a really good idea of what's wrong with this show and understand why it really shouldn't exist. The episode begins with some fleeing Earth Kingdom people and a long-winded fight scene against the Fire Nation soldiers, reminding us all how Avatar's elemental bending just does not translate into live action combat, no matter how advanced CGI is. To give some points to this opening action scene, it does serve a purpose to the story, as just before the fight there was an Earth Kingdom guy saying they should just give up because there's no hope in the world left, and the Avatar showing up gives the same guy hope. It's a weaker version of what happens many times in the original show, but hey, it's something. Then we get to the first major deviation from an episode in the original series, which is the minimizing of the Fire Nation's conquest of Omashu. In the original show, the first 3 episodes of the second season consistently mention Aang's current quest, which is to return to the city of Omashu to learn earthbending from King Bumi. The third episode of the second season revolves entirely around Omashu being conquered and Aang trying to reconnect with King Bumi. The live-action show whittles this episode down to Aang just flying right into the conquered Omashu, knocking out like 3 Fire Nation guards while making quips.
I bet one of you guys has a key for this, don't you?
And going in to have a watered-down version of the same conversation Aang has with Bumi in the original show. Okay, there is so much wrong with this. Let's start with the Fire Nation soldiers. So in the original show, you're gonna hear me say that a lot, so just get used to it, Aang and friends do fight and defeat Fire Nation soldiers all the time. But the show does a good job of making these Fire Nation soldiers threatening enough that Aang and friends often want to avoid fighting them. And the times when they do have to fight them, it often comes at a great cost. For example, in The Cave of Two Lovers, Aang and friends are forced to take the dangerous cave path to Omashu because when they tried to fly, they were attacked by Fire Nation soldiers. And even though they survived the fight itself still served as a roadblock for the characters, as it forced them to retreat. If this were the Aang we see in the live-action version, they wouldn't have even had this problem, because he can just knock out a bunch of Fire Nation soldiers without breaking a sweat. It's such a symptom of main character beats up everybody syndrome that completely weakens the threatening nature of the villains just so the show can pad the runtime with more CGI bending that is inferior to the animated action of the original series. Even in the Return to Omashu, Aang, Katara, and Sokka get stopped by 3 Fire Nation guards once they enter the city. But instead of fighting them, they trick them by acting like Sokka is sick with a made-up disease called pentapox, because he has a bunch of dots on him from the pentapus that was in the sewers. This scene accomplishes so much more than the scene where Aang effortlessly knocks out the guards in the live action. First off, it shows that these guards are not someone that our heroes want to get in a fight with, making it clear they can't just fight their way out of every situation. It also humanizes the Fire Nation soldiers a bit by having them get scared of the disease, even saying something like,
"Didn't your cousin Chang die of it?"
And it also sets up what would later be the clever lie they would use to help the people of Omashu escape the Fire Nation with the whole pentapox thing. See how much more you can do with your storytelling when you don't just resort to, let's beat up some guys. And another even bigger issue with the removal of most of the plot of Return to Omashu is the cutting of Mei's brother, Tom Tom, the Fire Nation baby. A major plot point of Return to Omashu is that the son of the governor in control of Omashu accidentally wanders off with the Earth Kingdom citizens escaping the city. A keystone scene, I think, of the entire series is when the leader of the resistance states that the Fire Nation baby is going to grow up into a Fire Nation soldier.
But when he's older, he'll join the Fire Nation army. He'll be a killer.
Further illustrating the controlling nature of Fire Nation propaganda and how it turns innocent babies into ruthless soldiers. Tom Tom's non-existence also leaves out this line.
I'm sure the governor wants his son back as much as we want Boomy. It's a new day.
A line that reinforces one of Avatar's chief themes of optimism in an increasingly bleak world. But no. Just because the live-action remake has Aang have the conversation about neutral Jing with Boomy, they think they can just cut the rest of the episode, and they don't even get the Boomy conversation right. First off, what is with Boomy being all crybaby about his surrender? The whole point of Boomy being imprisoned is that he knows he's going to get out, and he knows that his choice to embrace neutral Jing and do nothing is going to work. This is why he's laughing in the flashback. Boomy is meant to be one of the wisest bending masters in the entire world of this show. Bro isn't gonna cry about doing the thing that earthbending masters are supposed to do, which is wait for the right opportunity to strike. Like, it's just the people behind the show resorting to the most generic leader who failed is sad sort of scene. And yeah, this kind of scene where a king cries about not being able to protect his people can work for plenty of king characters. But Boomy is not one of them. And if you had any regard for the source material, you wouldn't have directed the actor to cry in this scene. The location of the scene also weakens it so much. In the original show, Boomy teaches Aang about neutral Jing after they just escaped from Azula, and it was revealed that Boomy is still able to earthbend using his face, despite being stuck in a metal coffin thing. All of these circumstances of the scene and the entire episode that preceded it contribute to the weight of the conversation and help reinforce how important what Aang just learned was. The live action misses all of this because it takes place in a generic cell, Aang just easily beat 3 random stormtroopers, and the scene is not framed as some major point in a character arc, but instead is just one thing on the checklist that the show has to do because it was in the source material. Even the teaching of the neutral Jing is just so much weaker. Like, if we compare the line deliveries, it just does not work the same. In the original show, when Aang is taught about neutral Jing in addition to positive and negative Jing, he goes,
There are 3 Jings?
and then Boomy quickly goes,
Technically, there are 85, but let's just focus on the third.
which leans into how Avatar teaches us about the difficulty of mastering anything, that even this new, difficult concept for Aang is but the tip of the iceberg. But the live action has Boomy also say,
There are 85 different kinds of Jing.
in a way that is much more matter-of-fact, as if these 82 Jings are something Aang is going to have to learn. Like, they're aware that there was a line in the original about 85 Jings, but they didn't understand why that line was there. So they just kind of put it in with no regard for how the actor should actually deliver it to make the moment make sense. So then there's a scene in the Fire Nation Palace, and I just need to vent for a bit about how much Fire Lord Ozai lacks status in this show. Like, my goodness, I can't believe how not scared of this dude I am. In the original show, the face of Fire Lord Ozai is not seen for a majority of the series. A brilliant choice of writing restraint that elevates Fire Lord Ozai to this larger-than-life, mysterious, powerful figurehead, just enough before showing his face at the point where the show wants you to remember that he is a human being and a father. The live-action show does not take the same approach, with Ozai's face being hidden from view when he's shown in the first 2 seasons. And in a lot of ways, I get it. The imposing shots of faceless Ozai from the animated series would just come off as corny in live action, so it's almost better they didn't do it that way. However, the show still should have done more to make Ozai imposing. Like, just look at the blocking of this scene. Everyone is standing kind of in a circle, all looking directly at each other. Nothing about the framing of these shots communicates to us that Ozai has disproportionate power. Sure, he's dressed a little differently, and there's some really cringy lines from Lo and Lee about how he can kill you if he wants to, but as far as him being visually communicated as a force to be reckoned with, Bubkiss. I feel similarly towards Azula, and I think the reason that this happens is because the original characters were drawn from the ground up to represent the specific archetype they were going for. But with live action, they have to rely on what the actor happens to look like. And even beyond all of that, it's just such a testament to how much the people behind this show don't understand writing that they would put a character like Fire Lord Ozai in a scene where he did not actually need to be present. The original show used Ozai extremely sparingly. Every single time he appeared on screen, it was a big deal, because every time he appears on screen, he gets a little less mysterious and a little more human. And the show knew the right times to let those changes in our perception of him happen. This show doesn't understand any of that. It just puts the Fire Lord in the scene because, well, it seems like this is a good time for a Fire Lord scene, I guess. Another big problem with this scene is how much it puts Azula under the thumb of the Fire Lord. In the original show, Azula dominates most of Season 2 as the main villain, while Ozai himself has still not even been seen on screen. Most of the major villainous decisions, like the chasing of the Avatar, the trying to arrest Zuko and Iroh, and the attempts to capture Ba Sing Se, while they all could believably just be orders from the Fire Lord, could just as easily be things Azula herself wants to do, giving her more agency and making her more threatening. When you've got these meaningless scenes about how, ooh, the Fire Lord is putting this other guy in charge of Ba Sing Se, but he's more loyal to Azula than Ozai. Ooh, isn't that some political intrigue? And it's just unnecessary. We don't need internal politics of the Fire Nation like this is Game of Thrones. The reason that all the internal politics worked in Game of Thrones is because that show was about how the characters' relationships were strained because of politics. Whereas Avatar is a show about how characters' relationships are strained because of war and power structure. Are those things similar? Yes, but they aren't the same. You can't just go, ooh, I want to make Avatar more like Game of Thrones, because now you're trying to make it like two different things. And when you do that, both fall flat. So then we get a scene with Katara and some lady about the Painted Lady flower, so I guess they're gonna cut the Painted Lady episode from Season 3. And this is their way of taking it off the checklist. Setting aside that the Painted Lady was a Fire Nation thing in the original show and this is in the Earth Kingdom, whatever. I can tell that this whole scene is some kind of hollow attempt to invoke the feeling of the Painted Lady episode and reinforce the themes of hope with the whole Avatar returning thing. The lady's story is that she noticed the Painted Lady flowers wilting outside of her village and took it as a sign that the Fire Nation was coming, so she escaped just before they burned everything down. This got me thinking about how Avatar views the concept of spirituality and looking for signs. While Avatar is undoubtedly a spiritual show, it always had a very nuanced view of the relationship between spirituality and human action. For example, the fortune teller doesn't outright cast the titular fortune teller Aunt Wu in a concrete role of being in the wrong, but it does criticize her and the townspeople's over-reliance on spiritual signs to the point where they ignore empirical evidence. Or in The Painted Lady, where the townspeople learn not to rely only on their belief in the Painted Lady to solve their problems, but instead channel that energy towards cleaning up their town themselves. Heck, even the fact that the Avatar themselves is a human being channeling spiritual energy plays into this. Even though the Avatar is this larger-than-life chosen one sort of character, they are also a person who has to struggle and learn to bend the elements in order to keep the balance of the world through their own human choices. What I'm trying to say with all of these writing examples is that they are all well thought out and intentionally crafted to communicate a perspective regarding the complicated relationship between spiritual faith and secular reasoning. While this Painted Lady scene from the live action was the writers going, ooh, wouldn't it sound dramatic if some lady didn't get killed by the Fire Nation because she noticed a flower was wilting and that flower is the Painted Lady because it will remind the audience of that way better show? All of these in-universe concepts, like the hope the Avatar inspires, the absolute power of the Fire Lord, Bumi's lesson about neutral Jing, the Painted Lady, are all in some way regurgitated by the show in a way that communicates to me that the people behind the show have no concept of the actual weight behind these concepts, or how to properly communicate them in a way that is even remotely meaningful. And that's what makes all of it nothing more than a pale imitation of what came before it. Chapter 2. Poor communication. So the moment in this live action episode that may take the cake for the most baffling moment I have ever seen put to screen would be this.
Abandon all hope. If only someone could fly up there and take it down.
Good for morale.
Just What? So this moment of Aang cutting down the abandoned hope sign is just about the exact opposite of Aang's reaction to the same message in the original Serpent's Pass episode. In that episode, Aang and friends are forced to cross the Serpent's Pass for a bunch of different circumstantial reasons. The first being that Appa was at this time stolen. So Aang is not only without his mode of transportation, but is also emotionally distraught at the loss of his dear pet and last living connection to his people and culture. In the live action, Appa's right there. I don't know if Appa gets taken away later on in the season. I've been given no reason to want to watch the rest, but even if he does, there's absolutely no way live action would be able to give the same emotional weight to Appa's loss as the animated show. And that's the case for two main reasons. One, cartoonishly animated animals are just so much more emotive as opposed to CGI animals made to look realistic. And two, the fact that Appa is CGI disincentivizes the show from having him on screen too much, as his existence on screen is more expensive, as opposed to the original show, where Appa's appearances would be no more or less expensive to animate than any other frame. So the whole Appa thing is bust. Whatever, not like that was important or anything. But the other reason that Aang and friends take this journey through the Serpent's Pass is because they met a family with a pregnant wife who lost their passports and are unable to take the ferry to Ba Sing Se. This gives so much more weight to the journey and makes our heroes seem that much more heroic, that they gave up their own leisurely ferry ride for the sake of helping just one family. Why did they take the Serpent's Pass in the live action? I don't know. It's just kind of the next location on the map, I suppose. And also, it's a direction that was in the original show, so we get to check that box off. So back to the abandoned hope thing. In the original show, Aang is in such a dark place after losing Appa that he actually agrees with the sign, saying that him holding on to hope is a distraction, and his character arc throughout the episode is him overcoming that negative perspective and finding his own faith and hope. And he overcomes that through the birth of the baby named Hope, the baby that Aang himself risked his life for fighting the serpent.
I've been going through a really hard time lately, but you've made me hopeful again.
Can you imagine how much weaker this moment would be if at the beginning of the episode Aang saw the abandoned hope sign and just like scribbled it out with a Sharpie going, it's good for morale, doy. And once again, this moment becomes all the more weaker because this live action remake for some reason hates babies as plot devices. You know, it's weird. First Tom Tom and now Hope. That's two babies the show cut and made the story way weaker because of it. I think that the decision to cut these babies might have just been logistical. It's harder to have a scene with a baby in live action. You either have to deal with a real baby on set, which is a whole thing, or you get a CGI baby. And the people behind the show probably saw everyone clowning on the Squid Game CGI baby and decided it just wasn't worth it. And the reason that this is all so unfortunate is that the presence of these babies in Avatar is incredibly important in telling a story about war. A baby both is something extremely fragile and thus more likely to be hurt by war, and also something that represents limitless potential, a new person who will inherit the world that Aang is trying to save. It's just kind of a slam dunk writing-wise for a representation of some very powerful concepts. But it's also really hard to present it in a way that doesn't come off as cliche. The original Avatar nailed it with both babies, of course, but I know that this show would have just screwed it up. And maybe they knew that. And maybe that's why they didn't attempt it. The entire Serpent's Pass sequence would go on to have many more laughable moments, like a scene where the characters talk about how scary Azula is.
Do you think blue fire's cold?
No, it's very hot.
Got it. Scary sister. Add it to the list.
This is a textbook example of writing a show for people who aren't paying attention. You know, that's like official writing guidelines for Netflix now. They're actively considering people who are only half paying attention and making the show worse in order to accommodate them. Like, they probably had the characters say that Azula had blue fire because they have so little faith in their audience to actually look at the screen that they just have to describe the visual. And telling me that blue fire is hotter, don't patronize me. The original show never stated that blue fire is hotter. It's just a scientific fact. And when you eventually learn it in science class, you're like, oh, that's why Azula had blue fire in Avatar. Oh, wait, it's because she's such a perfectionist. She needs her fire to be the hottest. Oh, wait, that's like totally her downfall later. She burned too hot and burned out, and that's why she went crazy. oh wow, those are such cool conclusions that I came to myself instead of being spoon-fed it by cynical Netflix executives who think I'm a TikTok scrolling moron. And then there's this.
We're going too fast, and it's too high. I'm just a kid.
Seriously, I actually laughed out loud. This is like something out of The Room.
What kind of drugs do you take?
I'm just a kid.
Like, how can you look at the original Serpent's Past episode and all of the work they did, earning the audience's sympathy for this family that's being escorted across the pass, and think, yeah, I'm sure reminding the audience that these two background characters are kids is enough. You're tearing me apart, Avatar live action! Then we get to the Serpent fight. All of the stuff I said earlier about the lack of Aang's emotional connection to the journey and the removal of the pregnant mother reduces the Serpent fight to little more than just a way to show off how they made some CGI monster thing. Yay, you spent more money to make something look less impactful than an animated show from 20 years ago. How impressive. Now, I'm not just going to sit here and clown on every silly, awkward moment from this sequence. I'm going to actually analyze the deeper story problems here. Okay, I can't help myself. We'll get to the story stuff in just a minute. All right, so at first they think the Fire Nation is attacking them, but it turned out that the Fire Nation was attacking the Serpent. But then when the Serpent starts attacking our heroes, the Fire Nation soldiers who were attacking the Serpent just kind of disappear. Where did they go? Why were they here? Were they being followed? They set all this nonsense up just to get this one line delivery of,
I think it's on its own side.
just because it kind of sounded cool and profound. Also, the lack of Toph being able to create the island in the middle gets rid of how the fight should actually be blocked. Since they're already on the other side of the water, why the heck is Aang leading the Serpent back to all the civilians he's trying to protect? Like, you can fly, dude. The thing's chasing you. Go the other way. With Toph's rock island, the Serpent fight was much more condensed. And oh my goodness, why is the secret tunnel guitar guy here? I know they've got like a bigger party that includes the inventor dude, but seriously, the secret tunnel guitar guy stuck around? What is the point of that? Okay, CinemaSins dings out of the way. What are the story problems here? So, in the original Serpent's Past episode, the Serpent action sequence is meant to conclude the episode's two main arcs, being the arcs of Aang and Sokka. We already discussed Aang's with the whole hope and all that, but Sokka also undergoes an arc in this episode where he learns to not be so overprotective of Suki due to him not yet overcoming losing Yue at the North Pole. When Toph falls in the water and starts drowning, Suki rescues Toph before Sokka, proving to Sokka that she can take care of herself. This leads into their final conversation where Suki reveals that the only reason she went with them on the Serpent's Past journey was to protect him, which subverts Sokka's pre-established notions of his own responsibilities as the oldest man left in his village, as needing to protect others. In the live action, Sokka does basically nothing in the Serpent fight, and him and Suki's whole thing comes down to a scene in the beginning of the episode where Suki is like, "Wanna be my boyfriend?" and sitcom Sokka is like, "Whoa, that just happened." And the Yue processing comes down to a scene where Aang says to Sokka, "Hey buddy, wanna talk about Yue?" And sitcom Sokka is like, "Whoa, I think I left the refrigerator running, can't talk now." It reduces everything about the character down to, will he get with the girl? When in the original show, the romance is but one small part of a larger character journey. But the live action Serpent scene does try to do something resembling a character arc for Aang when he feels bad about hurting the Serpent out of self-defense, and Katara helps him heal the Serpent with waterbending. So this was something that was not present in the original show, being that the live action has some kind of subplot where Aang earns waterbending healing and is like reluctant to do so. In some ways I could see how this would make sense, both with Aang being the Avatar and with Aang being a pacifist, that waterbending healing would be something that could fit his character. However, from a story standpoint, learning the subset of waterbending healing just kind of clutters Aang's main goal, which is to master all four elements. Like, this is the season where he's supposed to learn earthbending. He's already done with water. That was the first season. So in the season where the Avatar is supposed to learn earthbending, he's also learning waterbending healing. And also, why is Aang so nervous about doing healing? Like, he's almost as reluctant to do healing as when he was reluctant to firebend in the original show. But it's much more meaningful for Aang to be reluctant to learn firebending because he swears off of firebending when he hurts Katara. Why would he be reluctant to learn healing? I mean, maybe he thinks he'll screw it up and hurt someone? Is that a thing that happens in one of the season 1 episodes I missed? benefit of the doubt, maybe it is. Look, the healing thing being the arc, it's not terrible. It's not better or even close to what Aang's arc was in the original Serpent's Pass episode, and it's mired by so many bad writing choices around it that it barely functions as an arc. So it in no way makes the show watchable, despite it being acceptable. Chapter 3. Change for the sake of change. So one major trend in this live-action remake that I've noticed is what I like to call change for the sake of change, which is when the show will do something different just because it doesn't want to do exactly what the original show did. Now, when I criticize this phenomenon, just know I am not saying that this show would have been better if it was just a shot-for-shot remake of the original Avatar but with real actors and CGI special effects. My position on this show is that it should not exist because Avatar fundamentally does not work in the medium of live action. So I'll start with a small one, which is Katara being offered to join the Kyoshi warriors by Suki. This is something that was not part of the original show, but seems to be the direction this show is going in. It's just so obvious that they're only doing this to find something else to do with Katara that she didn't do in the original show. There's nothing really about the Kyoshi warriors specifically that has anything to do with Katara other than the fact that both Katara and a Kyoshi warrior are female fighters. I think that perhaps they're leaning into this Kyoshi warrior thing because some people were disappointed that Katara ended up being most known for being the world's greatest healer in The Legend of Korra, when a major element of Katara's arc is her rejecting the gendered expectation of her culture to become a healer and not a warrior. However, I don't think there's anything wrong with Katara choosing to embrace being a healer in adulthood. The problem with the northern waterbending culture that the show criticizes is not that women are healers, it's that women have to be healers and are not allowed to be fighters. Katara and Master Pakku break this system, and just because after that Katara embraced the bending technique of healing undermines none of that story. And she doesn't need to have this Kyoshi warrior thing shoehorned in. She's literally the one who defeats Azula in the final episode. I think she plenty proves herself as a fighter. Also, Ty Lee becomes a Kyoshi warrior in the end of the original show, so Katara is basically stealing an ending that is more fit for another character's redemption arc. And speaking of Ty Lee, remember those great scenes from the original show where Azula goes to the circus that Ty Lee is performing at and basically does a mob boss guess, "Hey, nice circus you got here, be ashamed if it burned down," and Ty Lee plays along with this sense of positivity and agreement to Azula's abuse that we as the audience can tell is going to be a compelling and complicated power imbalanced relationship? What if instead of all that we get this line?
I heard she rescued you from the circus.
Oh, yeah, I'm so rescued.
Yeah, who needs complex portrayals of actual emotional manipulation when you can have sarcastic quips? But that's not even the worst change that comes out of the whole Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee trio. Oh, no. We gotta have Azula test their loyalty, of course.
I'm gonna count down from 10. And by the time I reach 1, I expect one of you to be dead.
Cool, so now I no longer believe that these three are actually friends, and you have now on the surface shown that Azula is completely in control and abusing them, unlike the Ty Lee circus scenes that still communicate that Azula is forcing Ty Lee to do her bidding, but because she did it in a way where she didn't explicitly say, "Do this or I'll burn you," Ty Lee can still act buddy-buddy with her and allows this trio to still function as an antagonizing force while also giving room for Mai and Ty Lee to redeem themselves later. Let's get rid of all the subtlety in favor of this "Mwahaha, I'm an old-timey villain, fight each other for my amusement." But let's get to another weird change for the sake of change. The Sozin's Comet reveal is now here at the beginning of season 2. So we went a whole season without revealing that the Fire Lord must be defeated within a strict time limit. Yeah, sure, not like that had any effect on the stakes of the show or anything. We can just put that off till season 2. And you just know that they didn't reveal this until now because they didn't know how much the actor who plays Aang was going to age by the time they ended the show. So they didn't want to say last season that the comet was coming in less than a year, and then the dude's grown up by the time it comes. Like, I think the only reason they revealed it in the first episode of season 2 is that they filmed seasons 2 and 3 back to back. So at least they have an idea of how Aang is going to look in the finale. But even then, they still were ambiguous about when the comet's coming. They're like, could be months, maybe years if there's production delays or another writer's strike or something. Let's keep it flexible when the Fire Lord is gonna destroy the world. We don't want people on Twitter making fun of the timeline. But Sozin's comet almost seems to be replacing the eclipse, because they say that they need to get the Ba Sing Se to warn the Earth King about Sozin's comet, instead of in the original show where they need to tell the Earth King about the eclipse. Do you even understand why the eclipse was important? The reason they wanted to tell the Earth King about the eclipse was so they could plan an invasion of the Fire Nation with the Earth Kingdom army on that day specifically, and end the war. What do they have to gain by telling the Earth King about Sozin's comet? Hey bro, make the troops fight harder. Oh thanks, we weren't already doing that. But this brings me to the changes this episode made that just made me feel empty. A lot of this episode made me angry. Some of it made me laugh out loud, and some of it just made me bored. But there was one story thread in this episode so hollow, I had to save it for last. And that's the Zuko-Iroh scenes. Zuko in the second season of the original Avatar show is probably without a doubt some of the greatest character writing ever put to screen. It's a tried and true story. A person born royal, forced to live amongst the common people, with the added stakes that the commoners Zuko has to live with are the very people the nation he was born into are meant to subjugate. The pre-Ba Sing Se early season 2 episode shows Zuko and Iroh essentially homeless, wandering the Earth Kingdom as fugitives from the Fire Nation. For some reason, the live action decided to center episode 1 around Zuko and Iroh working on some big farm picking vegetables. Okay, I mean, yeah, I kinda get it. Zuko is supposed to learn how to live like the people he sees as beneath him, so being a common laborer aligns with that. But what the original show did with him being homeless already accomplished him learning that, so just changing wandering traveler to laborer is unnecessary and actively weakens Zuko's internal arc by replacing it with a bunch of scenes where he squabbles with other random Earth Kingdom people. Ooh, the guy who pays him says he broke a handle and he has to pay one of his coins to sleep on the property. Ooh, this meanie is taking Zuko's crops. These one-scene little conflicts mean little more than just, let's find something to fill the screen time with this farm setting we put Zuko on in the episode, rather than all of the early season 2 Zuko-Iroh scenes that specifically contribute to his overall character arc. But the last scene with Zuko and Iroh shows me that I guess it's possible for someone to watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, a show made for children to understand its themes, mind you, and just not understand anything about Zuko as a character. I'll start with the issues with how Iroh is presented first. So Iroh in this scene is basically just telling Zuko what to do. He's saying, I saved enough money to start a tea shop. You should work it with me. And Zuko is like, nah. The thing about Iroh in the original show that makes him such a good guide for Zuko is that he doesn't actually tell him what to do. He instead advises him towards making the right decisions himself. I think this scene really shows that well.
It's nothing to be ashamed of. There is a simple honor in poverty.
Iroh is not telling Zuko here, hey dude, just give up everything and live a life of poverty. Instead, he is telling him that there would be no shame in it if he did. Not telling him what to do, just expanding his freedom to choose by explaining to him what his choices are, and that a choice he may think is downright bad may not be as bad as he thinks. Another example from this exact same scene is this.
Even if you did capture the Avatar, I'm not so sure it would solve our problems.
Iroh is not saying here, stop chasing the Avatar, Zuko. He's saying, okay, I hear what you want to do, but please consider this is something that may happen if you succeed. I'm pretty sure the only time in the show Iroh outright tells Zuko what to do is when he tells him not to steal Appa from Lake Laogai, and the fact that this is the only time Iroh tells Zuko what to do communicates to us that this is an egregiously foolish act on Zuko's part if even Iroh is yelling at him. That's the most important thing we can learn from Iroh in the original show, and how we should emulate him. Oftentimes, just telling someone what to do as if you always know best is not going to push them in the right direction. Yet for some reason, live-action Iroh does exactly that for something as minor as telling Zuko he needs to work in a tea shop with him. Then after that, Zuko gets mad at Iroh because Iroh didn't become the Fire Lord and let Ozai become Fire Lord. And because of that, Zuko got banished and all that other bad stuff happened. Dude. Zuko's whole arc is about overcoming how he internalizes the Fire Nation hierarchy. He believes his honor was lost when he insulted his father, and he believes that he deserves the scar that he has. And he also believes that capturing the Avatar is the only way to make it right. This is what makes him a villain, but it's also what makes him principled. It allows us to understand that Zuko is someone who is capable of believing something and is capable of holding on to ideals. It's just that those ideals are flawed due to the propaganda of his culture and the personal abuse by his father. This makes it all the more meaningful when Zuko says to Ozai's face in season 3,
"How can you possibly justify a duel with a child? It was cruel and it was wrong."
Finally shifting the blame off of himself and onto his father. What's that scene gonna be in the live action? "I no longer blame my uncle, I blame you, Dad." Wow, way to remove the actual character that moment should be about from his own redemption arc. And this all happens just because the show feels like it has to do something, anything different from the original. Look, I'm not saying that there's nothing the original Avatar could have done better. I can't really think of any examples. It's a pretty darn good show. But even the best shows have some flaws. But when a show is as high quality as the original Avatar was, you just aren't gonna have any success trying to do anything different with it. This live-action remake is like if someone baked a nearly perfect cake and then took that nearly perfect cake apart and baked it again with a bunch of different lower quality ingredients. Like, sure, at times I can taste the part that's the original cake, but like, at that point, why'd you do all this? The first cake was right there. The thing about TV shows and movies is that they often can't be repeated. It's not like the medium of theater that thrives on doing more and more performances with different actors and slightly different directorial choices. TV shows don't work like that. They happen, and then people can rewatch them forever. And sometimes when there is a particularly amazing show, we get this urge that we should do this again. And I think that we should be wise and resist that urge. The original Avatar is incredible, but it can't meaningfully be repeated. You can tell other stories set in the universe, even some with the same characters, but the actual original story with Aang and the iceberg and the Fire Lord and the Zuko redemption arc, it's over. It finished. Get over it. You don't just get to do it again because you changed the medium. And all of this production, the writers and actors and set dressers and lighting designers and sound designers and CGI artists and editors and all the other talented creative positions have all had their talents wasted in this pursuit of entropy that will sit in the dustbin of artistic history while the superior original show will continue to be watched and rewatched for generations to come. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more video essays, click on this link right here. Or if you want to see some of my live stream content where I criticize those dreaded AI channels, click on this link right here. If you like what I do and want to see me do more of it, consider becoming a channel member or supporting my Patreon. See you next time.